Peppa was warming her hands by the fireplace. A family photo in a frame lay nearby. Papa's face in the photo turned. His eyes became coal black. A smile stretched across his face to his ears. Black drops were sliding down the glass of the frame. Peppa jumped up. She recoiled. The photo under the glass was pulsating. Dark liquid began to appear beneath the frame. Peppa grabbed the frame and ran to the attic. She opened an old chest, threw the photo inside, and slammed the lid shut. A dull thud sounded from inside the chest. Immediately, a second, louder thud followed. Shadows stirred on the walls. They merged into short figures with empty eye sockets. They moved toward the chest. Peppa descended into the basement for a flashlight. Damp stains on the walls were moving, taking on faces from the photo. Distorted, crying faces. In a far corner, an amorphous mass of black sludge and tangled shadows pulsed. Tentacles stretched from it toward the ceiling. Dozens of red eyes on the mass suddenly opened wide and stared at Peppa. Low, shadowy figures crawled out of the mass, creeping toward Peppa across the floor and walls. Peppa ran out of the basement. Standing before her was Daddy Pig, holding that very same frame. Its glass shattered, and inside, the photo had turned black, except for Peppa's silhouette. Black liquid was dripping from the frame onto the floor, sizzling as it hit. I found an old frame in the attic. Daddy's voice sounded metallic and lifeless. Peppa stepped back. Daddy dropped the frame. Black tentacles burst out of it, wrapping around Peppa's legs. Daddy's face began to melt, black drops streaming down as it turned into a shadow. A loud bubbling noise came from below. Suddenly, figures began emerging from darkness. They surrounded Peppa. Peppa pressed herself against a wall. Tentacles squeezed her legs. The shadowy figures approached. More clearly now, they were other family members, all with distorted faces like Daddy's. The black mass climbed up the walls, flooding onto the floor and reaching toward Peppa. Peppa entered a narrow shop filled with dust and old things. On a shelf stood a glass icicle with a tiny Labubu figurine frozen inside it. The label read, "Make a wish. Break it." Peppa bought it and made her wish.
I want George to stop crying.
She shattered the icicle on the floor. At that moment, dead silence fell over the house. Peppa returned home. George sat on the rug, not crying anymore. His eyes turned glassy, empty. The next day, Peppa wanted ice cream. By morning, the fridge was packed to capacity, but it was made of worms moving in bright cups. Once, there was too much noise in the house, and Peppa longed for silence. Her parents opened their mouths, but no sound came out. Peppa was frightened. In the corner of the room appeared a Labubu toy. It had grown to ceiling height. Its crimson smile moved as if alive.
Your new wish. I'm listening.
Peppa ran outside, clutching a shard of icicle in her fist, and made her last wish.
Bring everything back as it was.
A huge Labubu appeared before her, its body made of broken glass and shining brightly in fragments. It laughed silently.
You can't cancel trends, but you can lead them.
George stepped out of the shadows. His glassy eyes reflected the moonlight. He raised his hand and pointed at Peppa. His mouth opened wide and a swarm of glass shards burst forth from it, each carrying inside tiny Labubus. They sang in a thin chorus as they merged into Peppa's skin. She tried to shake them off, but they stuck and grew inside her skin. Her skin hardened into transparent glass. Their last scream froze in her throat into a quiet chime like shattering crystal. Peppa went outside to gather leaves. An oppressive silence hung in the air. Roses bloomed near the house, but beyond them, plants lay withered and blackened. The ground beneath Peppa's feet trembled faintly. She hurried to the shed for her rake. Twilight deepened. Shadows cast by trees stretched unnaturally long and twistedly so. A faint metallic screech came from inside the shed. Peppa stumbled as a sticky root covered in rusty slime emerged from the ground near her foot, writhing and reaching toward her boot. She screamed and jumped back, running to the shed. She burst inside into semi-darkness. It smelled of dust, dampness, and old rust. An old shovel hung on the wall. Suddenly, its rusty blade slipped off its hook with a loud clang and plunged into the earthen floor before Peppa. Black, oily liquid seeped from cracks in it. Its wooden handle bent into a curve like a tentacle reaching for her leg. The screech intensified as pitchforks on hooks across from her jerked downward, their metal dripping with dark liquid forming sharp, pulsating spikes beneath them. An axe fell from a wall nearby with a crash, chopping through air beside her as rust-colored ooze flowed down wooden walls like tears. A thick black puddle spread across Peppa's boots beneath her feet. Tendrils made of barbed wire and rotten burlap slowly stretched out from it toward her ankles, writhing like living things. On a high, dusty shelf sat broken garden gnomes. One suddenly turned its head sharply. The clay face cracked open, revealing tiny red dots that flickered briefly before it clumsily jumped down. Peppa slowly stepped out of the shed. Cold tentacles coiled around her ankles from beneath a puddle of black slime. Deformed tools, shovel, pitchforks, axe, advanced toward her slowly with glowing black spikes pulsating ominously. Gnomes approached from another side with unblinking red eyes. Black rust spread over Peppa's boot, turning fabric and skin into gray cold metal. One eye lit up with dull, lifeless red light like that of a gnome, the other wide with horror as shadows and metal closed in around her. Peppa walked into the store. Miss Rabbit was standing by a vending machine fixing something. Pay attention to the mirror on the wall. In its reflection, a different Miss Rabbit. Black eyes, a mouth stretched ear to ear, black liquid dripping from the corners. Peppa said anxiously,
Miss Rabbit, something's not right.
Miss Rabbit approached the mirror. In her reflection, the same terrifying smile. Her face briefly aligned with the reflection. Black eyes, a wide grin.
Trick of the light, haha.
She said casually. Peppa noticed a mirrored jewelry box on the counter. It was empty inside, the bottom made of mirror. But in the mirror of the box, not Peppa's reflection, but writhing black tendrils reaching downward. It wasn't a window, it was a door. Peppa dropped the box and shattered it. Black liquid seeped from the shards, and thin tendrils crawled out of it. They slowly reached for Peppa's legs. Panicked, Peppa ran deeper into the store and leapt into a dark back room, slamming the door shut. On the back wall, a large antique mirror covered with a dusty cloth. The cloth twitched as if someone were breathing behind it. Suddenly, it flew off by itself. In the mirror, not Peppa, but a distorted version of her. Black eyes, a wide, unnatural smile. Tendrils burst from the mirror, gripping the frame. The reflected Peppa reached a hand through the mirror. Her fingers dripped with black liquid. The real Peppa slowly walked forward, eyes wide. She wasn't moving on her own. There was the sound of glass cracking, distorted Peppa laughter, the rustle of tendrils. Peppa stepped out of the back room. She was smiling, but her eyes flashed red for a split second. A black drop slid from the corner of her mouth, a shard of mirror on the floor. In it, the same horrifying reflection of Peppa flickering. Miss Rabbit's pharmacy. Peppa walked in. The place was empty. Only the neon signs buzzed softly. Behind the counter stood a porcelain mannequin in a white coat, its face smooth and blank. Peppa approached the counter. Two black slits suddenly appeared on the mannequin's face. Thick black liquid oozed from its mouth. The mannequin reached out a hand. Peppa recoiled. The shelves trembled. Something was moving inside the medicine bottles. Tentacles crawled out from under the counter. They slithered toward Peppa. The pharmacist mannequin stepped out from behind the counter. Its movements were sharp and creaky. A grimace of pain formed on its smooth face. Peppa ran toward the storeroom. A vial fell from a shelf and shattered. From the puddle, black finger-like tentacles grew. Pharmacy storeroom. Darkness. The smell of medicine and rot. Peppa lit up the shelves with her flashlight. Boxes were stained with sticky black blotches. Bandages on the floor squirmed like snakes. The beam caught a figure sitting in the corner. Miss Rabbit, wrapped in sticky black bandages. Her eyes were crusted shut. Her mouth was sewn shut with thick black thread. Miss Rabbit's eyes snapped open. They were hollow black voids. Peppa dropped the flashlight. Tentacles from the bandages grabbed her leg. The pharmacist mannequin stood in the storeroom doorway, smiling. Peppa tore free and ran through the front hall. The bottles on the shelves burst open. Black shadows with red eyes crawled out. A chorus of hissing voices. Glass shattering everywhere. Peppa burst through the door and slammed it shut behind her. Pounding from the other side, the door trembled. She turned to the display window. The glass was coated on the inside with thick black fluid. In the reflection stood Peppa, but behind her, the clear silhouette of the pharmacist mannequin. A tentacle hand reaching toward Peppa's neck in the reflection. Real Peppa touched her neck. It was sticky. Peppa and Pedro were standing by the shelves with children's books. Peppa noticed an old fairy tale book. Its cover shimmered with uneven light. The surface was cold and sticky. The book opened itself. The pages stuck together and became damp. Black letters slid off the pages in a viscous mass. The mass formed insects with thin, shiny legs. The insects crawled onto Peppa's hands. Peppa screamed. She threw the book to the floor. Nearby books began to open one after another. Swarms of black creatures flew out of the books. Pedro was standing by a small bookhouse watching an open book. Letters from its pages detached and crawled onto his hands. A black mass enveloped Pedro's face. He froze in place. A sharp squeal tore through the air, sounding like tearing parchment. The librarian stood at the end of the aisle, her eyes shining unnaturally. Peppa burst into an empty hall. She dove under the nearest table. The librarian's white shoes stopped nearby. Her socks looked directly at her. Peppa froze. The shoes turned away and moved back. Peppa crawled out from under the table. The librarian was standing by a window. Peppa started crawling toward the archive door. She turned around. The librarian turned her head. Her eyes became spinning reels. Distorted letters flickered on film strips within them. Her mouth stretched into a silent scream. Peppa was pulled into the darkness of the storage room. Shelves rose up to the ceiling, towering over her. The air was thick with dust. She pressed against the door, her heart pounding fiercely. At the end of the aisle stood a figure, motionless. Peppa approached. Pedro was facing a shelf, his face covered with black mass that pulsed slowly. Books on the shelves trembled. Pages fluttered wildly. A mask on Pedro's face turned around. Empty eye sockets stared at Peppa directly. She ran toward the exit. The daylight beckoned at the end. She hurried around a corner. Peppa froze. Standing in front of it was the librarian, blocking her way. Her figure was motionless. Her reel-like eyes spun slowly, flickering Peppa's name on film. Her mouth stretched into that same voiceless grimace. Black shadows oozed from beneath her skirt, flowing onto the floor like ink. Peppa turned back. Behind her, shadows caught up, wrapping around her legs as cold, sticky mass rose upward. The light from behind the door faded the motionless figure of the librarian, and advancing darkness obscured it completely. Peppa was standing in the yard, looking at the sky through a telescope when she saw a shooting star. Except it wasn't a star, but something angular flickering with red lights. It fell behind a hill silently. A black flash lit up the sky. From the woods came metallic screeches and bubbling sounds. Peppa's phone rang. A video call from Susie. Susie looked frightened.
Peppa, I saw it from my window. Don't go there.
The connection distorted. Susie's face twitched and froze in a strange grimace before the screen went dark. Peppa walked with a flashlight through heavy air. Black slime covered tree trunks. Footsteps echoed around her. Not behind her, but from all sides. The clearing was empty except for a pulsating black vortex in its center, made of sludge and metal. And nearby stood a tall, thin creature with charred black skin, cracked like dry earth. Its long arms had many joints. Instead of a face, a glowing red slit, it was rummaging through debris. Peppa saw Susie's phone nearby and tried to grab it. Suddenly, the creature straightened sharply. Its face turned toward Peppa, and piercing metallic scream filled the air as black tentacles slithered out of the vortex. Peppa ran back, her mind echoing with Susie's distorted voice.
Stay, watch.
She stopped at a shed, turned around. The forest was dark and calm again. She took a breath. She looked up at its roof. There stood Susie, her skin gray and cracked with tiny red points for eyes, her mouth stretched into a horrifying smile. Susie waved her arms and jumped down. A sudden movement. She grabbed Peppa by both wrists instantly. Behind Susie, other figures emerged from shadows, gray, cracked with red-eyed points. They silently encircled Peppa. Susie tilted her grotesquely smiling head toward Peppa's face. From her throat burst that same metallic scream, the one heard in the woods. In Peppa's eyes reflected Susie's red points, and suddenly faint red glow ignited within her own pupils as well.
More is needed. A full collection is required.
The fair buzzed with lights and voices. Colorful stalls beckoned with sweets. Peppa pulled Grandpa by the hand toward the brightest stand. The shelves were bursting with Labubu figurines. They all smiled with identical mouths. One golden figurine stood apart. Its crimson eyes followed Peppa's every move, then slowly winked at her. Behind the stall, an emaciated seller looked as pale as paper, their smile frozen too wide with too many teeth. Peppa begged Grandpa to win her a golden figurine. He nodded and moved smoothly. He threw a ball into an arcade machine. The ball hit its target. The figurine dropped into a tray. Grandpa picked it up. His eyes glazed over, and he reached into his pocket, pulling out not just one, but dozens of identical golden labubus that spilled onto the carpet. He whispered endless repetitions.
More is needed. A full collection is required.
Outside, people with prizes froze in place, their faces fixed with empty smiles. Peppa ran into darkness. The alley behind the fair was silent and dark. A flickering street lamp illuminated an ominous figure, that same seller. But now his body consisted of hundreds of fused figurines. They moved and creaked teeth. Clicking nearby stood Grandpa, whose skin had turned gray and hard, the smile frozen forever. He stared blankly through glassy eyes at emptiness. The seller extended his hand holding one figurine, a face resembling Peppa's with glowing crimson eyes, a mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. Peppa felt icy coldness at her fingertips. The skin on her palm became smooth and glossy. Hundreds of crimson-eyed monsters stared at her. The silence shattered with a sharp click.